Okay, so in the last community of practice, there were a few items that I needed to address on the spending plan. Um, I'm just going to cover those real quick. So the first was that the carryover was not obvious. The second was the available spend was not obvious. There were a couple questions about rolling spending plans over from month to month, um, and making sure that that $10,000 max came into play in the right way, as well as the deduction of spending items from prior months. So I looked at both of those in more detail. I also determined that the $10,000 maximum was hard coded. So those are all addressed in this new version. Um, if we look down at the sample plan for the individual directed goods and services, first, you can see that goods and services accrual year to date is now in bright lime green. The goods and services spent year to date, also bright lime green. And those are the two items that need to be carried over if a plan is rolled over. Next is what is available or not available for IDGS for the spending plan. So in this case, because there's nothing, that piece of the spending plan isn't included or isn't completed yet, you can see it's nice and clean $10,000 that is remaining. So those items are addressed. The other calculations are on the back end. Because everyone wanted to make sure that the goods and services spent year to date was accurately reflecting information, there's a couple options for this. Because over time, FMSs will report on both the accrual year to date and the goods and services spent year to date. If we go to the top of the spending plan, you can see that there's two options for completing these. So if it's not the first spending plan of the year, an individual could use either a spending report or the prior spending plan flexible spending summary, item 25, to complete this item. So if they have a prior or no prior plan, it's going to be 0. If there is a prior plan, they have to pull those two numbers either from the bottom here or from an FMS report. So what does this look like in pretend life? Okay, so we have our first year for Ernie Employer. I have him completing a spending plan through the end of May. There's no accrual. He has some standard hours. If we go down to his IDGS amount, you can see that with his standard hours and his plan, he gets a $10,000 accrual. He also has $5,345 of planned spending. That's all current right now, right? He has no future spending that's in there. You can see he does have $4,655 that's still available based on that accrual that he has to date. And if I do a quick sum, you can see this down at the bottom, that does equal $10,000 because there isn't any additional planned spending or prior spending. So if I roll this over, so remember I have this going from January through the month of May. So I rolled it over. So it goes from June 1st through September 15th. And because Ernie Employer had some prior spending, so I grabbed that year-to-date accrual of $10,000. And now here, if we look at the goods and services spent year-to-date, it's 4,532. So how does that compare? So remember that it looks like we were planning on having a little more spending, so this is not the exact same number. And as I mentioned, the reason why you might use a different number here is if there is more accurate spending information available from the FMS entity. So you might know that something costs less in the end. Occasionally something might cost a little more, but there's plan and there's money for it. So let's go through this. So the prior spending is going to be a little bit different because we have data from the FMS. So as I said, it's 4,532. If I sum it here, it's still that, oops, 5,345, because this is the information that was on the prior plan, and this is the information from an FMS report. Say I didn't have information from an FMS report, what's going to happen? Okay, so 0, I know the accrual, but I don't know the spending from the FMS. So without the information from the FMS, it's just going to pick up that prior spending from the report. And the same thing here. If there's nothing here, it's just going to do what's included in the current spending report. So in this case, we'd have to go back, we'd have to get that accrual of $10,000, and we'd have to enter it. And we'd have to go back, and we'd have to get that 5,345, enter it here. So we have that prior spend report. Okay, so now our accrual is here. But look, the planned spending is greater. If I sum up all the items in the item cost, it ends up being over $10,000, so $10,758. So the entire plan for the year is greater than that $10,000 max. Now, the prior spending is still that $5,000. The current spending that I have listed is $580, and so the current, what I've spent year to date, is going to be the sum of these two. I still can plan out $4,075 towards my $10,000 max, but there might be an item that I can't spend. So if I delete, say, this $1,000 item because I'm $758 over that $10,000 max, let's see what happens. Okay, so I just reduced that spending. Okay, so let's look at the third one, because this one goes to September 15th. So let's look at the next month. So I carried over my spending, $10,000 accrual. My planned spending is lower. I have my realistic spending from that FMS report, and then the current spending. So what's available, everything's included, and I can just kind of spend down this money or carry it over if need be.